Today, we become legends.
Smite 2's first ever LAN event just concluded over the weekend, and we got to see the highest level Smite 2 competition we've seen thus far. What worked, what was overrated, and what can we learn? Let's jump in. I'll quickly start by saying that this tournament was played on patch CA7, so there will be some slight differences in what was strong here compared to what is currently strong on the live game, which is on patch CA8. But I'll let you know as we go through what I think was strong at the LAN, but might not be as good on the live client right now. Thor and Nuwa were also banned for this event because of bugs, and Baron was banned from day 2 onwards for the same reason. But first, this video is sponsored by Marvel Strike Force, the thrilling squad-based RPG with all your favorite Marvel characters. New players can unlock up to 17 of these in the first 30 days, including Spider-Man, Deadpool, and even Thor. Use my link in the description or scan the QR code on screen to download the game for free and unlock all these awesome characters. In Marvel Strike Force, you'll venture around the multiverse assembling your team of the deadliest superheroes and even supervillains to compete and save the universe from the threats of Doctor Doom and Apocalypse. These foes are tough though, and you'll need to power up, unlock gear, and gather resources along the way. Once you've got your crack squad of heroes and villains, it's time to jump into some of the various game modes of Marvel Strike Force, like Campaign Mode, Blitz, Arena, or even Alliance War, where you can team up with other players to take down immense raids. Or if you're more inclined to beat other players, check out the Cosmic Crucible for some PvP action. But make sure your team synergy is on point, as other players will not hold back. New characters are constantly being released into Marvel Strike Force, and in December, the new team led by Kahori joins the fray. She's limited time only, so don't miss out. You can also unlock even more free characters and costumes using promo code DECK24. There's never been a better time to download Marvel Strike Force, so go to my link in the description or scan the QR code on screen and make sure to use promo code DECK24 for even more free stuff. Thanks again to Marvel Strike Force for sponsoring this video, but back to it. Okay, but let's jump in. First up, let's talk about gods. First up, we have the solo lane, where similar to the open bracket qualifiers, Chak and Amaterasu were the two premier solo laners that saw play. Ama clearly came out on top this time though, with Chak having a pretty awful win rate at 5 and 12, while Ama had an amazing record of 10 and 4. I think this event has clearly solidified Amaterasu as the top solo laner in the game right now. As mentioned, Baron was banned for this event and likely would have seen a lot of solo play, but with the bug on his passive being patched on live client along with big nerfs to both him and CDR, I expect Baron will fall off massively on the current CA8 update. In terms of other solo laners, we saw quite a bit of Hades being brought out, which was surprising, with it even being banned quite frequently against 5Ms, as Cherio loved this pick. It was slightly negative, but looked to have potential in the games where it did get through. Sobek and Fenrir were also played some in solo and did reasonably well. Moving on to the jungle, where once again Loki was by far the highest picked jungler, but unlike previous events, he actually had a poor showing with a 9-17 record. I think part of this is due to the meta favoring bruiser junglers at the moment, but the individual nerfs Loki has taken, along with strengths items being pretty weak right now, probably had a hand in it as well. Athena was really the show-stopping jungler for this event though. While she wasn't played a massive amount, she won all 5 games she played convincingly and seemed super strong in the role with a bruiser build. As the event went on, she even started getting banned as the players caught on to the fact that she was winning every single match she was in. On the topic of bruiser junglers, Odin also did really well from jungle in this event, going 6 and 2, and Fenrir went 5 and 2 as well, often with a bruiser build. It really felt like bruiser jungles just took over the role in this LAN. Nemesis also saw quite a bit of play, but didn't do super amazing in most of the games she was picked in, going 4 and 6 for the event. Next up is mid, where to no one's surprise, Poseidon came out on top for this LAN. This is one that needs some context though, as this was played on CA7, so the major nerfs this god took in CA8 weren't applied. He's likely substantially worse on the current live version of the game, so keep that in mind. He did dominate the mid lane in this event though, going 13 and 6. Hecate also saw a lot of play and did worse than the previous Founder Series events, but still okay in terms of win rate, and a handful of players made this god look like one of the best gods in the game. It's also worth noting that Poseidon sucked up a lot of the wins from mid in this event, and I think if he wasn't available or was nerfed for this LAN, Hecate would have had a better showing in terms of win rate along with some other mid laners. Zeus once again saw some play but didn't do very well. He does still completely blow up teams with 2 abilities with a high int build, but I also think the frontline draft style with triple tank that was used a lot in this event kind of held him down. It's hard for Zeus to do anything when there's 3 tanks in his face all the time. He went 4 and 8, so not a great showing regardless, but I do think the meta was highly unfavorable for Zeus. Ra and Kukulkan saw some mid play as well, but nothing too crazy, going 3-3 and 3-2 respectively. Moving on to support though, where Yemoja was once again the most picked god in the role, but she didn't actually perform all too well, going 7-13. I do think this stat for her specifically should be taken with a grain of salt though, as she was a high priority pick, so teams would often take her even if they didn't want to play her, just so the enemy team who did have a good Yemoja couldn't play her, which probably skewed the win rate stats a bit. That combined with her being banned against the teams that actually have a good Yemoja and were winning, so basically all the teams that actually make her work never got to play her, while the teams that didn't make her work were allowed to play her and lost. In the game she was picked, she did do really well. Sobek was the next most prioritized support and a highly priored god in general due to his flex into the solo lane. He went 12-5, the best support record in the tournament, and it's clear Sobek is still incredibly strong. Though he did take one additional nerf to his Pluck's cooldown in CA8, so he's a tad weaker on live client than in this LAN. If Yemoja and Sobek were gone, Ymir is what most players fell back to, and it was surprisingly effective with an 11-5 record. I will say that when watching the games, he didn't seem to have as much impact as Yemoja or Sobek individually, and was never banned really, but you can't argue with results. He did have a good performance here, even if he was mostly used as a fallback support when the top two were taken. Baron saw some support play before being banned due to a bug on day 2 of the event. He didn't even do all that well either, and as I said earlier, this bug is fixed on live client in addition to the specific Baron nerfs and CDR nerfs, so he's likely fallen off a lot on the current patch. And finally, Bacchus went 0-4 in support and was rarely picked by good teams, so I don't think he's worth considering for the role really. And our final role to talk about is ADC, where it was once again mostly the Kurdanos and Jingwei show, this time with some Cupid sprinkled in. Jingwei performed better in terms of win rates, but Kurdanos was prioritized more and picked more. A god with an 87.9% pick rate is generally going to trend towards a 50% win rate just because he's in almost every game though. We did see some interesting new build tech in the ADC role, which we'll get to in a second, but as mentioned, Cupid was the next most used ADC with a 5-6 record, and he looked fine, but nothing too crazy. Anher and Zeus picked up the remaining games, going 2-0 and 1-1 respectively. Not too much to talk about there. Alright, moving on to items and builds for this tournament though. The most bought item in the game was once again Talisman of Purification, which is no surprise. It's nerfed on the live client, but even if this patch was played on CA8, it likely still would have been the most bought item. Every support, most solos, quite a lot of bruiser junglers, and even some mid laners bought this item, and it was extremely common to see 3 or 4 of these per team, with most players going Blink, Sunder, or Aegis and picking up the slack with multiple talismans. Continuing with active items, Sunbeam Bow was extremely popular, with it being part of the new ADC build that took over the tournament, where you rush Sunbeam into Braggy's Heart for some insane on-hit shred combined with Kins, which, speaking of Kins, it was once again preferred over Crit in this event because it's just stronger and because of the heavy emphasis on bruiser junglers, making it a necessity. Sunbeam was also used as a rush for armor solo in this event, so that's worth noting. Cersei's Hexstone was once again very popular, with a lot of supports rushing it first item, especially on Ymir to give him some much needed mobility and safety. I truly believe that without this item, Ymir got farmed and would have been nowhere near as popular. If you are watching the games, you know what I'm talking about here. Cersei's was his saving grace in allowing him to play aggressively with a fallback escape option if caught out. Pharaoh's Curse was still popular, but less so than in previous events, while Pribwin saw quite a bit of use that we hadn't seen before as well. The rest of these active items were just picked up very occasionally. In terms of passive items, Glad Shield once again dominated, with the highest usage rate by far among passive items, being rushed by supports and solos alike, and even occasionally on bruiser jungles like Odin, Fenrir, and Athena. This item is pretty heavily nerfed on CA8 though, so keep that in mind. Gem of Focus was the next most used, being in basically every mid build as well as some solo builds on gods like Chak and Armor, in addition to Athena jungle using it as a rush from most players. This is slightly nerfed in CA8, but not as much as Glad Shield, and the item is still strong on live right now. Kins and Executioner are next up, which as mentioned was the preferred route for ADC builds due to the heavy tank presence. Titan's Bane was also used a lot in the same build and on some junglers. Shard was also popular for the same reason. Tank busting was necessary with the meta being so tank focused and bruiser jungles being so common. Soul Gem remained popular, and a lot of mid builds were just Soul Gem into Gem of Focus. Soul Gem was also somewhat popular on int based solo laners like Chak and occasionally Armor. Ankh and Divine Ruin were also used a lot due to healing being very strong in the game right now, with a ton of lifesteal, Chak and Armor from solo, Yemoja from support, etc. Braggy's Harp, as I've mentioned before, is a part of the new ADC build that was pioneered in this event, but Berserker's Shield was also extremely common on ADCs to give them some survivability while still granting a ton of attack speed for stuff like Kin size. Fatalis fell off a lot in usage, both due to nerfs and ADCs needing every slot in their build for stronger items like Sunbeam, Braggies, Berserkers, Kins, and Double Pen to deal with tanks, but it was still bought a fair bit at roughly 10% usage. That's about it in terms of notable items and builds from this event though. We learned a lot from this tournament, and while some of the picks and items are already nerfed on CA8 because this event was played on CA7, a lot of stuff used here hasn't been nerfed, so this likely will cause a big shake-up in the meta for Smite 2. Catch you guys in another one later on. Have a great day, and peace out, you nerds.